Welcome to the MS-Perspektive podcast. Perspective with a K, as I'm German. I'm Nele Handwerker, MS patient, patient advocate and author. I'm bringing you interviews, inspiration and information about living with multiple sclerosis and show you ways how you can positively influence the disease and make the best out of your diagnosis. On ms-perspektive.com, you will find the show notes, 11 free tips as a PDF, and lots of other information. And now the show begins.
This podcast is supported by Mid-Mission, a project of the nonprofit Hertie Foundation.
Thanks for tuning in again and welcome to episode number 54, Living Fully with MS, Managing Bladder and Bowel Disorders. This time it's about bladder and bowel disorders caused by multiple sclerosis. Around 2/3 of all people with MS have at least one episode of impaired bladder and bowel function. This is triggered by inflammation that impedes the transmission of stimuli from the brain via the spinal cord to the bladder and bowel. Unfortunately, it is a classic taboo subject, although it does not only affect MS patients. Women after childbirth, but also many men, have such problems. It's just that almost nobody talks about it. Thanks to a wide range of support services, you don't have to limit yourself. Let's start with, when do bladder and bowel disorders occur in multiple sclerosis? Bladder problems, like visual disturbances, are among the first symptoms of multiple sclerosis. In a few cases, they are the only initial symptom. In around 10% of all MS sufferers, bladder problems are a significant part of the symptoms that led to the diagnosis. Previously, it was estimated that after a decade of illness, around 2/3 of sufferers from bladder dysfunction and are restricted in their daily lives. Bowel dysfunction is estimated to affect 40 to 70% of all people with MS during the course of the disease. The figures here are less precise because the subject is associated with great shame. For both disorders, the sooner the problem is addressed, the sooner it can be treated and kept to a minimum. What types of bladder and bowel disorders are associated with MS? Overactive bladder, low urinary urgency, or inactive bladder occur with decreasing frequency. An overactive bladder has difficulty holding urine because the bladder muscle spasms. This results in frequent visits to the toilet and even wetting. This is the most common symptom. If the urge to urinate is only slight, the bladder is not emptying properly. The urine flow starts slowly and stops prematurely. The bladder, which remains quite full, can lead to pelvic floor spasm. An inactive bladder is the least common. In this case, the urge to urinate is completely absent as the bladder muscle is flaccid and no longer functions. The toilet is visited far too rarely. The bladder is overflowing, and coughing, sneezing, laughing, or other pressure causes the bladder to overflow. Constipation is clearly the most common bowel disorder. Uncontrolled loss of stool, bowel incontinence, is much less common. In principle, it is also possible to have both problems alternately. However, this is more likely to be the case if the symptoms have not been treated for a long time and have become worse over time. Therefore, please always consult a neurologist as soon as possible. Often the transportation no longer works well. In far fewer cases, a spastic sphincter is responsible for the problems. What can you do yourself if you have bladder and bowel dysfunction? You can do a lot with your behavior to support the bladder and bowel in their activity. All of the following tips relate only to MS. If you have other illnesses, such as cardiovascular, metabolic, or others, please check with your doctor first. Let's start with the diet. Drink plenty of water or tea, preferably unsweetened and not too strong, so that your body really gets plenty of fluids. Please only drink coffee or other intense caffeinated drinks in moderation. I always brew my green tea very often and only let it steep for a short time. This way I have a pleasant taste but very little tea. I have an espresso in the morning and one in the afternoon. This helps me to combat tiredness, and it is perfectly acceptable. Reduce your alcohol intake as much as possible. Alcohol tends to numb the senses and also the body and is better consumed only rarely and in small quantities with MS. Eat a balanced diet that is as high in fiber as possible. This means lots of vegetables, whole grain products, pulses and fruit. Fermented foods are also good for healthy intestinal flora and an active gut. These include yogurt, buttermilk, vinegar for fresh salads, and sauerkraut. Meat and sausage should only be eaten in small quantities, and prefer a low-salt diet and fat only in moderation. In general, variety on the plate is good. Then you get all the nutrition your body needs. If you have problems with residual urine, cranberry juice is good for inhibiting bacterial growth in your bladder. You can also listen to the existing episode on this topic. This is number 32, Neurant, Unlocking the Nutritional Code for MS with Dr. Mireia Sospreda. Let's talk a bit more about behavior. Do not suppress your urge to urinate by crossing your legs. This may be necessary in rare cases, but in the long term it can exacerbate existing spasticity. It is better to go to the toilet preventively or at regular intervals. Try to find the right balance by not training your bladder to fill up less and less, but also by not cramping it. Daily pelvic floor exercises will help your muscles to regain their strength and counteract the symptoms. There are plenty of them. Yoga has a lot to offer: special pelvic floor courses, aqua gymnastics, simple tensing and relaxing. For women, there are targeted pelvic floor exercises, especially after giving birth, but also for men. Climbing stairs trains the pelvic floor, and a particular charming way is sex. Not as a means to an end, but as a nice effect on the side. Jogging, on the other hand, or other exercises that involve a lot of jumping up and down, such as trampolining, are counterproductive for a weakened pelvic floor. Exercise regularly and try to incorporate a good mixture of stretching, strength, and endurance into your sports program. This will help you with bowel problems in particular, but it is also very good for your general physical well-being and any other symptoms. If you are not sure whether you have too much residual urine in your bladder, you can also keep a diary of how much you drink and how much urine you pass. Of course, this means that you have to measure how much you have urinated using a measuring cup. Or you can contact specialists who can also provide information using ultrasound or other methods. For more severe problems with constipation, a colon massage can be very pleasant. If you only need it infrequently, a physiotherapist can perform it. If you have a regular problem, you should have it explained to you so that you can do something good for yourself. What about psych? Perhaps you need to go to the toilet more often when you are emotionally tense. Then it can be helpful to use talk therapy, whether as one-to-one psychotherapy or in larger discussion groups. You need to find out for yourself. Please check your medication. It may be that antispastic drugs or other medications intensify your bowel disorders. It is best to ask your neurologist about this and weigh up together how the benefits relate to these side effects before making any adjustments. After all, with MS, you may well be struggling with several symptoms. In general, also, you cannot repair the damaged nerves with the measures mentioned. You can help your body to optimize all other factors that influence the bladder and bowel. This will certainly reduce the problem. What aids and medication are available for bladder and bowel disorders? Let's start with medication. There are medications that alleviate the spastic contraction of the bladder, while others have a relaxing effect on the sphincter muscle. If you can no longer sleep through the night, it is possible to temporarily reduce urine production or specifically weaken the muscle responsible for the urge to urinate, the expulsion muscle. If your bladder problems lead to an acute urinary tract infection, antibiotics can help. Water-retaining laxatives are used for the bowel. By means of osmosis, they draw water back into the large intestine so that your bowel movements do not become hard, but remain soft and can therefore be excreted more easily. In addition, a large amount of stool, due to the more water, stimulates intestinal activity better. There are also medications that stimulate transportation. If the external sphincter muscle is severely affected by spasticity and causes pain, an injection can provide relief. And if the opposite problem occurs, an involuntary defecation, you can use medicinal charcoal tablets. They bind the bowel contents. Let's come to the aids, assistive devices and stoppers. There's a large portfolio of aids that help you to participate in normal life as relaxed as possible without having to take your MS symptoms into consideration. These include incontinence aids that collect urine and stool. For women, there are special pads and tampons, and for men, there is a type of condom. For bowel problems, there is a type of tampon for both sexes. You can even continue swimming with it. And swimming or aqua sports are among the sports that are particularly good for MS. So it's all the better that aids can help you to continue doing water sports. Controlled emptying of the bladder and bowel. If you have problems emptying your bladder, you can learn to caesarize yourself. However, you will need good fine motor skills to avoid accidentally injuring yourself. One step further is permanent urinary diversion or a bladder pacemaker. For bowel evacuation, there are clysters and other aids that flush the bowel in a controlled manner so that it can be emptied. Please do not attempt this yourself, but ask a specialist to explain the technique and equipment to you. The water must not flow too far back into the bowl, as this would be dangerous. What can you do in acute phases? Talk to your neurologist. They can certainly help you. And the better your neurologist knows about all the symptoms, the more specifically he can help you and weigh up your treatment, if you have more than one MS symptom. And if bladder and bowel disorders remain permanent, then there are many experts who can help you. Nutritionists, physiotherapists, medical specialists for incontinence. You are not alone. Many people have this problem. But you will only find relief if you dare to talk about it. The more openly you describe the situation and where you are restricted by the bladder or bowel disorder, the better all these situations can be eliminated for a fulfilling and enjoyable life with MS. You should also apply for the Eurotoilet key if you are regularly traveling within Europe, no matter how large your radius is. It gives you access to over 12,000 public disabled toilets. In the UK, it's called the Radar Key, and be sure to check with your local patient organization to see if there is a special key for disabled toilets in your area if you don't live in Europe. This can be a huge relief in everyday life and when traveling. After all, there are often long queues for the toilet at train stations or in city centers. Often all you need to apply is confirmation from a neurologist that you have incontinence. On the following pages, you will find detailed information on the symptomatic treatment of bladder and bowel dysfunction. There's something on MS Society UK, bowel dysfunctions, as well as bladder disorders. And on Can Do MS, there is a FAQ for bladder and bowel. And on the National MS Society website, you find Managing Bladder and Bowel Issues in MS. All these links you can find in the show notes or on my blog article. What is the best prevention against bladder and bowel disorders? That you lead a healthy life with sufficient exercise, train your pelvic floor, eat a balanced diet, drink enough, and consume only a few stimulants. And of course, a functioning immunotherapy that protects you from further lesions and relapses and stops multiple sclerosis as completely as possible, or at least slows it down considerably. One last food for thought. Talk to your neurologist about your bladder or bowel disorder, regardless of whether it occurs acutely or whether you have had it for a long time and have been afraid to talk about it. Help is available in many different ways, but you must address a problem and ask for support. Your doctor can advise you, and you can work out a strategy together on how to deal with a problem. As much as necessary and as little as possible is certainly a good way. After all, if you can initially counteract the problem with your own measures, you will have further options if the symptoms worsens. But please don't wait too long, as this could exacerbate the bladder and/or bowel dysfunction. In addition, resulting infections can worsen other MS symptoms or even trigger inflammatory activity. And if it's acute, bold intervention may also be the best choice. One last question to you. Do you suffer from bladder or bowel problems? If so, of course, I'm always interested if you write to me, but also it's very good if you are open-minded about it and talk to your neurologist. That is the most important thing. As always, I hope you enjoyed the episode and learned quite something new. And by the way, next time I will talk to Professor Celia Oreja Guevara about therapeutic decisions regarding pregnancy and lactation. Very interesting interview, very interesting topic, especially for all ladies, but also for men. And I hope to hear next time. And please remember, if you know somebody who might be interested in this podcast, please share that it is out there. And of course, I'm always very happy if you rate it wherever you listen to it. And stay as healthy as possible. Bye. Thank you for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You may also be interested in the previously published episodes and posts, which you can find at ms-perspektive.com/podcast. Perspective with a K. You can also get a free PDF with 11 tips for your positive impact on MS at ms-perspektive.com/newsletter. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach me at nele@ms-perspektive.com or on social media. Hear you next time.